in what literature can do to preserve our local Ghanaian languages. Dana Bank, who are joining us from Puerto Rico, Professor Kofi Anidogo is here with us in Accra. So we will hand over to them. Thank you very much. Welcome, Professor Dana Bank, and welcome, Professor Kofi Anidogo to Beja 2020.
Thank you very much, Dr. Globe, and all the other people involved in putting this program together. It's a pleasure to be back on this stage, sharing ideas on something that has preoccupied me for some time now, in spite of my official employment as a professor of English. I've dedicated a great deal of the past several years seeing what I can do to promote my own language as well, or promote my creativity through my own language, even as I continue to write in English. But let me take the opportunity to welcome my good friend, Danaban Guabo, who was with us in the English department at Legon, both as a student and indeed as a lecturer, before moving to Canada and then relocating to Puerto Rico. For the last several years, every long vacation, he comes back to Ghana with a group of his students from Puerto Rico and runs a program for them in the English department. So clearly he's not one of those people who leave and forget us here, that we are also here and things can happen and are happening here. Danabang.
Thank you, my big brother. And I always say Kofi is my mentor. So I heard that he was going to be sitting. I said, what better than to sit with the elders and listen to them and chat. So Kofi, thanks a lot for all that you've done for Ghanaian literature, for promoting oral literature in our languages, and all the money you've given to so many young Ghanaian poets. So I can't thank you enough. And to join the thanks, Nasana Seku from St. Martin says I should give you a big hug if I can get you. Hello, can you hear me?
It's disconnecting. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, okay. So I'll say thanks a lot for promoting and all as we did not know our way through the spoken word or the written word. And when you came back to Ghana and you started the oral literature program with Sianka, you dragged me along, and I know the benefits I derive from always being around you. So thank you a lot. And Nasana Seku from St. Martin says,
Thank you. You would have noticed from the program that we have a curious situation here. Both of us are in conversation, and we happen to be the facilitators as well. So where do we start? We are told the session is dedicated to the promotion of Ghanaian languages through writing, through written literature. Language and literature, of course, go together. I would like to suggest that, Abang, if you don't mind, that we put a little bit of a structure to the conversation. to focus entirely on our work. You and I have been teaching literature in English and then writing in our languages, promoting literature in not only English but also in the various languages. So maybe I want us to start off by indicating, recalling to ourselves and to others here what we have learned from the examples of other people. I can make a start and then hand over to you. And I speak first as a teacher and a researcher into the English language and English literature. And one of the early things I learned in the history, or in my study of the history of the English language, just simply brought me back home. That not too long ago, in terms of historical time, English was probably in more or less the same situation that our languages find themselves in today. English was also once a colonized language, and the people of England indeed had to suffer the rule of other people who imposed their traditions, their history, and their culture, and ultimately their languages on them. We can go as far back as possible to the Germanic times, but Rome once ruled over England, and through that, England had to do much of its creative thinking, scholarly and creative thinking, through Latin. Then came the French, and for quite a period, the French language took over from English. I think that is important for us to recall. Going back to medieval times, when King Alfred in particular decided to do something to restore dignity to the English people, he tackled it from the angle of language. He did all he could to promote the English language. And in order to do that effectively, he set about promoting the reproduction of literature in the English language, encouraging translations of works from various languages into English. He himself trained himself with help of others to become a translator of classic texts into the English language. I don't know how many of you are aware of the fact that Shakespeare, as we are told, never finished high school, what they called in those days grammar school. If he had and gone on, especially to the university, he probably would have been taught to try to do all his writing through some other language, probably Latin. So let me just stop there. That what is happening to us, what has happened to us, we are not the first people it has happened to. We may not even be the last it will happen to. We can learn from other people's examples, starting with those who have managed successfully to suppress the development of our own languages, something that we took over and have been promoting ourselves, promoting other people's languages at the expense of our languages. So, Danaban, I want us to start from there. You may have one or two other things to add to that.
Yes. What you're saying is absolutely true and true for me. Let me give a personal example. I accused myself when I was doing my dissertation, and by writing in English and studying poetry written in English with an attitude of my mother tongue, I was actually contributing to use Wationgo and others terms to the development of English poetry or poetry in English, etc., etc. And I felt so ashamed, but the system made sure that I got the mantle to earn somewhere. Then I began to realize that all the education I received and also that studying English literature or literature in English, whether it was African literature, but it was all, and that kind of skews up our minds. We begin to forget our mother tongues, we begin to forget how to even think. So in a lot of cases, they write, we think in English and translate into the mother tongue, because for many years we actually become alienated from those mother tongues. But not to be discouraged, as I said earlier, when you and Yanka began the oral literature grounded, the Kofi and others were really pushing for the development of language literatures. And I was just reading your article on the power of the word, which was supposed to be an introduction for the first oral literature conference you organized in the linguistics department. And I realized that what you said probably 30 or 40 years ago still holds true today. That if we forget our mother tongue, forget the way in which literature actually helps develop and sustain the mother tongue, then we should turn around and blame the generations coming after us for forgetting their culture, for forgetting to even how to speak the language that they're supposed to be, natural. So for me, this is one of the issues that has confronted me. And recently I came to Ghana and I bought a book. And in that book, it's a collection of poetry by very young people. And in it, there were a few poems in Akan without any translation. I said, this is the beginning. In Ketia and others have talked about the development of our language literatures, whether it's drum poetry, xylophone poetry, whatever. But we need to see it actually in writing. And if we need to see it in performance, we need to see it in the way we say, I am a Ghanaian, but I cannot write in my mother tongue. I cannot speak in my mother tongue. I really am an outsider. So for me, this conference and this topic is really important. That we need to, those of us who say we are now elders because of our long beards or white eyebrows, we need to encourage the young people to actually begin to perform in the methods and to do more research, not just academic research, but cultural research. It will be that culture, the keyword, and write it also. Not just as academic topics, but also as cultural performances. So this is what I can contribute, right?
Maybe we should, while making a case for our languages, the need for the study of our languages, we should reassure ourselves and our employers and our students that we are not saying forget about English, forget about French. On the contrary, maybe this is where we can bring it home to myself. I have said this often enough, and there are people here who may have heard me say it 2 or 3 or more times, that the reason I fell hopelessly and helplessly in love with literature was because as a young kid going to school in my village, which is now a town, I was introduced to classics of literature from different traditions in translation into Ewe. So I first read Shakespeare in Ewe. I first read Molière, you name them, Tolstoy. And I keep saying it again and again that there was a particular Tolstoy story which made me cry each time I read it. But I'll go back and read it again and again and cry again and again. That was how my journey into literature, my love affair with literature started. By reading classic texts from different languages and traditions in my own language. I have demonstrated this to some of my colleagues and students. There are 2 boxes in my office at Legon full of some of those texts. You see Macbeth, Julius Caesar, you name them, in Ewe. The Arabian Nights in Ewe, which I read in middle school or in some of them even in primary school, upper primary. So, and I remember interviewing Rosama Taidu, and she assured us that she was introduced to English a bit later in her education. Otherwise, it was first and foremost infancy. And it provided a foundation in language skills which has sustained her since then. So those who are worried that we may be promoting our own languages at the expense of English, which we think we need for doing our business in today's world, it is the other way around. You check out the stories of all the great African writers who went before us, the Achebe, the Shoinkes, the Kofi Awunos, the Okonbi text, check them out. They became the best writers using the English language, but they were all people with solid foundation in the knowledge of their own language and the traditions that went with them. So I want us to underscore that point also. You may have something to add.
That's absolutely right. Myself, actually, I had to read the works in translation, particularly oral poetry. For example, Titi Niane, Epicos in Theatre, that has about 5 different or 6 different translations. I read Anthem for the Decades by Azizi Kunene in South Africa, and also Shaka Zulu. I read so many long epics that were composed in the local language, but also translated in English. And for me, I cannot read Zulu or Xhosa. I cannot read any of these, but the English translations gave me something that yes, I can also write in English, but it also echoes my mother tongue, and where I can then write in my mother tongue, I can do that. So I would say this is not to discourage people from reading a lot of writing in other languages, particularly colonial languages, because a lot of our own writers now are living those centers. And this is also a way of encouraging writers. But where we have a chance to also then write and create the mother tongue, I think we then have a kind of dual blessing for Ghanaian writing. Yes.
Maybe we should also add that, as a matter of fact, the education and acquisition of skills in our own languages is a right in itself that we should not forfeit. I'd like to share with you a short quotation here by one of our Ghanaian professors who has devoted his whole life to the promotion of African languages. Professor Kwesi Pra, based in South Africa. Our languages are our primary instruments of development. Without them, we cannot move forward. Of all these, and he was enumerating various aspects of culture, of all these various aspects of culture, both material and non-material elements of culture, language is the central pillar and the transactional medium through which culture is created, shaped, adapted, and adopted. As such, language is also a register of the records of humanity. It is indeed a representation of the history of humankind. It is a collective memory par excellence of the owners and users. That is why language is so crucial to development. I was a Nigerian colleague who was interviewed during the middle of the early crisis in Nigerian politics. Why do you think that we are not moving forward? And he says, it's because we speak too much English.
She's good now. That's all.
Maybe that sounds a little simplistic, but indeed, there is some truth to it that we should not overlook. But let me also get back to my brother here to share with us how his own, because I believe by now we would have been running through half of the time given us. We must begin to share with everybody how our own commitment to this enterprise started. You've said a bit of it, but I'd like you to go back to it formally. How did you get down to the business of writing in Agari, even as you continue writing in English?
You know, one of the greatest things that made me actually begin to go back home and listen a bit more was several years ago, they talked about Akwalu, the traditional poet. And then there was a traditional poet, blind man in my neighborhood, Upper West. And he had this kind of violin, and he would play and recite or chant poetry. He was very popular. Then I said, okay, what about the type of poetry that we have at our funerals? Because the Ngaba funeral ground is one of the most poetic places where the funeral, the judges, the chanters, they bring in a lot of history, a lot of culture, and a lot of poetry. So I decided that I would listen to that. I would actually ask questions. So while in Ghana, I was always going on and finding out judges or even women when they were working mastering somebody's house carry
Then the details sound.
without getting mixed up.
Go back to the details sound.
It's like the
Mute the
stories
details sound. The
the
detail.
that he
Mute
separated
the
the bad
detail.
water from the good water. Here it's not about good water or
So
bad
it's going off and
water,
on.
but different waters. How do I separate? And I realized that I don't even have to try too hard to separate. I should just let each one operate. And when they connection, let it be. And that has given me some kind of satisfaction. So this is my struggle that constantly. And because also I'm not living in Ghana most of the year, I know that I miss out a lot. So I've been buying a lot of TV recordings by our local poets. They have about 40 of them now, which I listen to, and that they help me when I'm composing a poem in my language.
Thank you. For me, it may have started much earlier, because the very first writing of mine that got published through the Creative Writers Association program for teacher training colleges and secondary school, which published Talent for Tomorrow, was a dialogue and then a poem in every. That was in the early 60s, early to mid 60s. But after that, I did what everybody else was doing. You write in English, full stop. With the belief that that is what is going to take you to the international market. And I did that again and again. There may have been some modest success. I started getting invited to poetry festivals here. And then one day I went home to inform my family that I was traveling outside once more for a poetry engagement. That was when my elder sister, her name is Essentia Akupodo, asked me a question that became a big challenge and an embarrassment.
Go back to the details sound.
So why do you continue writing your poetry in English for other people to enjoy and not think of writing a few of them in a for us also to enjoy? You remember we sent you to school? You can read, you can write everything, but you continue to write all your poems in English. Today would have been a wonderful occasion on which we were going to outdoor my children's play in Ewe Akpoklo and my collection of poems in Ewe Ghananya. Except that there was a challenge with the printing which would make it disastrous if you were to have launched these books today. But the final paragraph of my dedication was reserved for thanks to my sister, who embarrassed me enough for me to decide to start writing in Ewe as well. It was that challenge which turned my head back. But it wasn't going to be easy. It's easier to just say that let's write in our own languages. Maybe for you it was easy. Was it?
Not at all. Not at all. I just anecdotal. I wrote my first Ghana poem who is a Bible translation in Ghana. When I read it to him, he said, "This is not Ghana." I said, "What do you mean by it's not Ghana?" No, it was time for Ghana. The words and the time, that's what me. This is an English poem. So that's what we started, and I really have to learn the Ghana by myself. So it wasn't easy at all, as you
I would add very quickly that at the time I started journey, I was in constant conversation with our elder brother and mentor, Professor Kofi Awuno. And he was the one who introduced the idea that, you are right, we should be writing some of our poetry in Ebe as well. But we stopped exercising our skills in written Ebe since we left primary or middle school. And we haven't done it enough. Language is a skills business. If you don't do it, practice it constantly, you can't get fluency. So from that point, he said, never send me a note or a letter from today in English. I know you are a professor of English, but I don't want to read your English. For our personal communications, from this day, whenever you want to write me a letter or write a note, do it in a way. We started like that, it was like a joke, but there are special challenges in every word division, the boundaries between words. It's a constant headache for many people who try to write in Hebrew. It's the same with other languages. And then there is the question of what? The tonality of our languages. These become challenges you must contend with. But it is entirely doable with practice. And as I started writing, it became easier and easier and easier. And I just want to throw that also in. Let's not expect that it will happen automatically. The fluency in language skills comes with practice. And because we stop, even if we learned it in secondary school, once we graduate from secondary school, we stop doing any writing unless we get the opportunity to take any of the special courses that are on offer. University of Ghana, as a requirement for African studies, now gives people the option to learn a Ghanaian language. I think it's a wonderful thing, but you do it for one semester and then move on. I don't know that that is enough. But constant practice will make it easier, and the fluency will come sooner than you can imagine. I would like to suggest, Danaban, that we go back again to sharing experiences. Once you get on this road and you are traveling around the world, around the country, what feedback do you get?
The feedback is, I think, really great for me. Two examples. 2005, a friend of mine passed away while we were organizing a conference together. So they told me, oh, Danaban, you have to write a poem to celebrate her. I said, but how can I just write a poem unless her spirit really touches me? Then I sat down, and then suddenly I realized I could actually use women's tunes, women's dance tunes, to create a praise poem for her. So I did that at St. Martin at an international conference. I chanted this praise song for John Fair. And I got a standing ovation and said, you have to do more of this. You have to do more of this. You have to do more of this. We didn't understand what you were saying, but we felt what you were saying. To show that, yes, our own Ghanaian languages can convey a feeling and understanding that is beyond the words on the page. So, again, several other times started the gallery, and again, I got great acceptance. And I always feel like it's the gallery songs that actually is appreciated more than my attempts to write English inclusive, etc., because the Nagaric culture, the Nagaric images, they all come inside those images. So this is one of the experiences. I think we should not, I'm no longer like jittery or nervous when I have to recite in my language at a totally different gathering where nobody is even from Ghana. But they begin to realize that, wow, if a Ghanaian language sounds so poetic, so beautiful, then why don't you do it more? This is the question that I hear a lot. So it's a beautiful experience.
Well, thank you. I was invited once to a poetry festival in Turkey. I was one of a few African poets at the festival, about 4, 5, 6 of us. There are more than 50 poets from other countries and about 100 or so from Turkey. Everybody else read poetry in their own languages, which had already been translated into Turkish. Every one of us African poets, whenever we were called, we read in English or French. And in a conversation, more than 2, 3, 4, 5 colleagues at the festival asked, Kofi, don't you have languages in Africa? Don't you have your own languages? How come we haven't heard you read a poem in your own language? How come when you were asked to send a sample of your poetry, you didn't send 1 or 2 at least in your own language? It was once again an embarrassment. Fortunately, I was prepared. Indeed, by that time, I had written quite a few poems in Ewe. But when I was asked to send my poetry to the international market, somehow I was under the illusion that the one that will appeal most to people will be the ones I wrote in English. And here were my colleague poets who were saying, don't you have your own language? Do you ever write poetry in your own language? And so the next time I was called on before the end of the festival to read, I read 1 or 2 poems, or rather performed 1 or 2 poems in Ewe, and everybody went wild. So you have all this, and you've been wasting our time with those poems in English. I think it was an important revelation for me. Akpalu had said it. He referred earlier to Akpalu, the greatest poet in the Ewe oral tradition, known in the Ewe oral tradition, that it is to the big markets that poetry, the songs come on display. I will go to Tamale now. I've been to Kumasi twice. I'll take my songs to Tamale. When people lay their songs on display here, I lay mine beside them, and whoever is looking for a song to buy will decide whether to buy mine or somebody else's. So you may be producing in your language, but you have the inspiration, the courage to believe that it is worth taking to the market. Some of us are almost too embarrassed to do so, but I can assure you that there is a lot of gain in sharing your poetry with people in your language, even though they may not understand the language. Because that old man in Turkey told me, you see, just like that man just said, I didn't understand a word, but I felt that the richness of poetry was more in that one than the English ones you had presented earlier. The aesthetics, the beauty, the power of language comes through more forcefully. That is how come, and that brings us back to the main point of our conversation. That is how come it is necessary for the poets, the dramatists, the novelists, the storytellers, both the oral and written tradition, to compose in our languages. That is what enriches the language. I think the English know how much the Shakespeares and all the other great writers have contributed to the development of the English language. We should be doing the same for our own languages. And I think the teaching of the languages, both at home and in school, is a point of departure we must take much more seriously and pursue much more consistently. I come back to you.
Yeah, one of the things I want to suggest as an encouragement is that, at least from the perspective of the Catholic Church, in spite of all these problems, they have really encouraged the composition of psalms and songs and other things in the diary, so much so that it has every knows maybe translation, but there's also a lot of original poetry of praise and songs that have been done through the encouragement. And that's why we can take heart and say, even the tool of colonization, the tool of cultural erasure that the church can be, certainly it can also be a place in which an individual can rewrite a cultural agency. Take a Akan woman who composed a whole book, is it Abasa, a whole collection of praise poetry. And for me, that's one of the deepest poetry you can read because it's spiritual. It's translated by the language. So we can take I always say, even if my work is not about, if my language, people at home when they hear it, and those who are interested in non-European language poetry, particularly African poetry, that is the place I praise that. That is my job. That is my job. Again, the struggle, when I went home for my father's final funeral rites, people came up to me from different villages and said, "Are you the man in the white man's man? The giant meaning, well, you mourned your father." When we heard a report of the poem which my uncle said, we burst out in tears. We remembered our ancestors. We met all those people who had passed, and most of all, we remembered your father. So for me, I said, okay, this poem may not be outside, but the fact that it reached and touched, and it made me, gave me further encouragement to try to write even in more more. So it's tough. I think it's not about the money. It's not about the fame. It's about ourselves. That we write in our mother tongue or in English as a kind of way to remain sane. So I don't know what else to say at this point.
Well, I know what I want you to say next, but I'll come to that. Let's bear in mind that we are working within a certain time limit, and we should be, giving a chance to the audience to ask at least one or two questions. But I want to take our conversation back to where we started. We are not by any means saying that we should look only inwards and not outwards. This whole business of writing in your own language is the way by which some other countries have managed to possess the knowledge capital of the world. Not only what they themselves developed, but also the knowledge capital of the world. I was on an invitation to South Korea to give a series of lectures and read some of my poetry. They insisted, the person in charge insisted I should send him a selection of some of my poems. He himself was familiar with my work, had selected some, but said I should finalize the list. I sent him the final list only 3 weeks before I arrived in Seoul. He met me at the airport with a beautiful book of my poetry in Korean translation. They were not going to allow me to come and read my poetry to them in English without that the poems being available in Korean as well. So wherever I went to read, the people had my poetry in English as well as in what? Korean. It was extended to the lectures, the academic lectures I gave. They insisted on my sending a paper at least a few days before the lecture. You arrive in the lecture hall and you find a beautifully printed pamphlet being held by everybody of your talk in Korean. That's how they will possess the knowledge that is in that lecture. It becomes part of the knowledge capital that they are building up. That's how people have developed. The Japanese, you name them. We should be doing the same thing. And if there is any last thing I want to encourage, we should be translating our work between among the Ghanaian languages. I'm currently looking for somebody to translate my new play, Akoklo, into Akan, into Ga, into Dagari, at least a few of the Ghanaian languages. After all, it will be easier to do. I asked my colleagues what is the Akan word for, or Ga word for what? Akoklo never means frog. If you were translating this into Akan, what would you write?
Apotro.
Apotro. It can be easier than that. So we should be sharing the knowledge that the Akan people have developed by translating their works into what? Ga, into, and vice versa, into. That's something we should do more of. And we will be the better for it. But please, share a short bit of your work in Dagari with us. You can't be saying all this and just get up and walk away and say, but what have they done? I don't know whether you're prepared for that.
Let me see. Present. Window. Now.
Maybe while you are preparing yourself, I should have raised this earlier. I can share mine, and then by the time it's over, you can.
Yes, you
Okay.
share yours first.
I would like to share mine as recorded audio. Do we have it?
No, unfortunately, we couldn't stitch it into the live stream.
Oh, okay. I can partly read it for you from the first poem in this book. The origin of this poem is tied up with the funeral for Chief Togbi Poku III of Alakle. Koklo noku ato ndokuchu. Koklo noku ato ndokuchu gawe. They say a hen crowed at midday, 12 midday. Ablima go mano glotumu anemadekamba. The kasi yoma odo bari namulo yo. Pokwe gleba ablima go mano glotumu anemadekamba. Eyoma go mano glotumu anemadekamba. The kasi yoma odo bari namulo yo. Pokwe gleba ablima go mano glotumu anemadekamba. Dumagafia ponwe baye la voma. Asifunu di ndokuchu gawe vema. Yabubaza dokalie kashakashia renagaje yijonava fe asinagadi. Akahadanda chupota dotu na chokeke ablimebe. Abaolema do sagba paklasi kona tobi poku heklon devuna kuchemi. Yatefe Pon dasa pom gajablime. Povia ochi kojogwe. Potrome bekashia. Ahlewema do chakavuvu. Ahlewom. Abazolizom labloji. Akowom. Kodoma boji. Helevu. Heredom. Devumene homao. Avie afalo. Enu yakoha. Double cut them. Let me cut it here and explain one or two things. I want you to just, get a sound of the sounding, not just the sound, but the sounding of the poem. And in the poem, to write this poem, because I was challenged by the funeral committee that if I'm a poet, the chief of my town has passed on, I must compose a poem for him. I had to do a bit of research. The meaning of his name, Bonku, the leopard, has died. They say the leopard has died at the gate, and little kids have the nerve to be what? Pushing their fingers into his mouth. Why didn't they try it when he was alive? But something mysterious happened, and I must emphasize the mysterious. I wanted to know the traditional symbol of the Alakle people. And they said, it's the cock. I wrote this poem, I was rehearsing, doing a technical rehearsal, alone in my library, with a recorder. I was recording the rehearsal. This was around 1 p.m., a little after 12. Suddenly, a cock crowed in my compound. I didn't take note until I was playing back the recording. A recording in which, a poem in which I talk of what? The title is Kokro no Kua To in Dokuchu. A hen crowed in Dokuchu at midnight. And indeed, in the rehearsal, the technical rehearsal, this time a cock actually crowed into my recording and I captured it. It's a pity that the technical thing, you would have listened, you would have heard this cock crowing into. Maybe it was purely coincidence. But was it? I leave it at that. Please, let me pass it on to you, Donovan, so that we can give a chance for a few questions.
Can you see the form?
Can
Okay, this poem is was written to celebrate my sister's passing, and it's written Margaret Akankuloma. Margaret, even minute of Christmas, and then people don't like no one aya. But Gunum are a Gunum Gunare, that the Tona Gan, whatever. Margaret, Immaculate Malat and the one. Otanam Contabie, Otanam Contabie, Ubia Margaret and Ansenserete. Apa, Margaret, Yotaba, Namkono Wanaya. Okonom Contaye, Okonom Compaye, Okiman Ansen Diggy. Apa, Margaret, if Oyataba, Ina Wanaya. Bahinen Compaye, Okiman Ansenserete. Margaret, Imabir Nasik the Wanaya. The Kuren Contab, ye, Masculine Contabie, Amabian Ansen Diggy. Margaret, Babir Latina, Tira Wanaya. Bachira Contaye, Okiman Ansen. Margaret, Danabang Anne Abuela Bina one. By your power, Margaret, Banzoro in a secret cheera figure for no one in a year for no one. Who will my end of Ajakura-baya? Who will my end of Ajakura-baya? Who will my end of Ajakura-baya? It might be any comment that I did a moon of. Who will my end of Ajakura-baya? Who will my man in Ajakura-baya? Who will my man in Ajakura-baya? It might be any comment that I did a moon of. Equal Fabio. One line young is a dear young, a powerful. One line young is a dear young, a powerful. It has a healing back down. Check us the probability, and I'm sure that moon direct down the I yell at down for a father. The Kumbata Dom up until the Kund or long. Your children. We may have a boom and I'm so the Kun Dora here. Laboring. Duro is Duro in minute. Laboring. Dara a young piece at door. And I will that the Kun Duro here. Your problem. The chairman, my Dara. The poem goes on, and then another song. Yeah, yo, So this poem, it's pretty long, and
Well, maybe we can.
I'll stop there. Yes, and explain some of the things that in order to write this poem for my older sister, who was like a second mother, as my older brother would say, second mother to us, I really had to dig deep into the way in which funerals are performed, the way in which in the church, while praising my sister, I also draw on a husband's village. I had to do a lot of historical research about a husband's village, which happens to be my wife's village, to know the ancestors and indicating that if they were there, if they were real men and good men of valor, this their wife would not have. Because we know that it's not true. So I call upon all ancestors from my land and from my sister's husband's land to come and share and mourn with me. Though I could not go to the funeral, I recorded this and sent home to be given to the husband. And this is my mourning my sister. So the poem runs into about 8 to 9 pages, and people who have heard it say, well, they did not know these ancestors existed. Like the poem has brought back, and they actually want to go back home and do more research on how to write poetry in the mother tongue that will become deep. Also,
Maybe that's a good point at which to wind up our conversation. That's simply drawing attention to the fact that in doing creative writing in our own languages, we may not be promoting only the languages, but also promoting knowledge. Because I had to do some research to write mine. He had to do the same thing. And if you do that for every piece you write, and everybody does it together as generational writers, we will be enriching the language while also enriching knowledge about our own traditions, about our history, our culture. We thank you very much for lending us your ears, allowing us to borrow your ears. We are returning your ears to you now.
read as many poets' works as possible, particularly African poets.
Thank you very much, Professor Nidobu and Professor Danabang, who are home. We can take a few questions from those who are on site here, but I would like also to acknowledge very quickly the presence with us of Dr. Wale Okediran, who is the Secretary General of the Pan-African Writers Association. Thank you for joining. And also Dr. Francis Bomita, who is President of the Ghana Association of Writers. Thank you for joining. So we'll take a few questions and then we will wind up. There's a hand at the back. Wow, so many. Let me just take it.
Good evening, Prof. This is one of your proteges, your sons actually, Chief Mumin. Yes, and I have a very simple, or rather a simplistic question, if I would put it that way. I know you've always encouraged us to try and write in our local languages way back in the classroom. And someone like me, I get really jealous of my colleagues like Nana Asasi and Ramsoni, who are able to perform very well in Chi as well as in English. Currently, I only write and perform in English. I'm from the Upper West. I speak Wale, so I can identify with my Dagati brother. But I've always been afraid to write in my local dialect because even though I speak in it, I'm not as literate in it, to even give a formal speech in it, let alone to write. So I haven't attempted to actually even write in my local dialect at all, even though sometimes when I write and I'm performing, I use some of the words and some of the songs, but I have never really attempted to write in my local dialect. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because of my own fear or incapacity. How would you suggest for me to approach this process to attempt to write in my local dialect? Or is this something I shouldn't even contemplate because I'm not literate in it in the first place? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question. It's a question that I'm sure many other people may want answers to. Maybe you came when the previous session was over. We had a colleague who has just made a film, and he was telling us that there was a challenge of getting those who are acting to speak with reasonable fluency in one or two Ghanaian languages. And somehow they managed to achieve this. And you heard me say that when I started out, it didn't come that easy. I was reading and writing with great fluency when I was in middle school. But by the time I started trying to write my new poetry in Neve, that was some 30 years or so, or at least 20, 25 years gap, during which I had never been writing in Neve, so it didn't happen automatically. The problem is already half solved. You know how to write, though not in your own language. You know the language well enough. The rest is a challenge that many other people have overcome. Get rid of that fear or embarrassment or whatever you choose to call it. It is possible, even at your age, to develop what? Reasonable literacy in your language. And it is not your local dialect, it's your local language. Let's make that correction for a start. It is not a dialect, it's a language. So yes, the moment it is possible. I've heard you recite some of your poems already, bits of it in that language. There is a technical part of it, that is learning the alphabet. It's like going back to class 1 after you become a university professor. That's what happened to me. I had to go back and relearn the Ewe alphabet sufficiently to be able to add the special symbols that go with it, special sounds.
What about languages that do not have, established, writing registers? I don't know if I'm asking the question right, because not every language that has been developed in that literary sense. So
yes, there are still a number of Ghanaian and African languages for which have not yet been reduced to writing. If that is your situation, then it is a real challenge.
That is my situation.
Okay. But don't be too quick to say that it's not available. The people connected with the Bible. My wife is a member of the what do they call it? Ghana Bible Society. Their target is to make the Bible available in every one of our languages. And they have recruited people who are doing work on the Ghanaian languages that are not yet what? So check. Yours might be one of them they are busy working on. And link up with them.
Yes, actually there is a Bible in Wale, which I have here.
So you see, it's there. The school system is not doing a good job. They've left it to what? The missionaries to do. And that was what they did to get hold of our heads. They came, translated the Bible into our languages, and the first generation that learned it took it and Christianized all of us, and then went home on holiday.
Thank you very much to the two professors for this very enlightening conversation. My name is Sakud Amina Edego. I like to call myself an unrealized writer. And we know that language affects how we think. And I really like this session because we're talking about writing in different languages, which means that you're going to have to think in different languages to write in different languages. So I want to know from the two of you, from your experiences, if writing in Ewe translating to English, writing Dagari translating to English, etc., if it affects the authenticity of what you write. Because if you are writing in Dagari or Ewe, you're thinking in Ewe or Dagari. And if you're going to translate it into English, you're going to try to transport the thinking. So how is authenticity affected in the line of translation of your work from one language, more developed language or less developed language to the other? Thank you very much.
Yeah, can you go first? Yeah.
I would say it can be a dangerous or slippery word. What is authentic and what is not authentic? I asked a very big poet critic specializes in African diaspora why he does not like to explore African culture. It's too difficult for him because he reads them, he can't understand. So I said, is it because of the authentic voices inside the language of English that they're using? He said maybe that is it, but that is too deep for him to. And then writing in mother tongue, for example, there are certain things that you cannot express in the foreign language. Not that you cannot do it, but you cannot do it that really satisfies you as a writer, your soul, innermost being. And as I said earlier, my dirge to my father, though I could not go home, half of the poem, about 5 pages, was written in English. Use the telephone style language. So if you don't know the funeral xylophone, it's in English, but you don't understand. So that is that in this poem. And then when I came to the real deep tear part of myself, the poem just transitioned automatically. So I look at the two sides, they are both in different ways. So authenticity does not necessarily translate to writing one language or the other, but the authenticity of the feeling, the authenticity of the emotional impact, the message that you are using. So that's what I can say for myself.
Yeah, my brother, I want us to understand that what we are suggesting or what we try to do is not unusual. That's what all of us here do every day of our lives. We are communicating in at least 2 languages, alternatively sometimes. Sometimes, along the side. You have 2 people sitting next to you, one you can communicate with in Ghana, the other one in Hebrew, and then the other one in English. And you say something to one of them, and then you try to explain the same thing to the other one in Ghana. We do this all the time. It is a question of how accurate the translation might be. That also is a skill you have to acquire. It's a highly specialized area, but at least for purposes of communication. We do the best we can. So it's not, let's not, make it sound like a mysterious thing that is beyond us. We are doing it often. Most of us operate minimally bilingually in our daily lives. And that's what we're encouraging the writers also to do. Yeah. There may be challenges, but the more you work at it, the more confident you become, the more fluent. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. It's rather unfortunate the point at which the conversation is warming up so much. We have to be winding up, unfortunately, because there is another session that is going to be starting shortly. But Professor Nido has mentioned something about translations. I'd just like to draw attention that there is going to be a session actually on translations, and this is going to be tomorrow. So Professor Nido, Professor Danabanku Abong, and German poet Jan Wagner, who also does translation from German to English, will have a conversation, and we will get a perspective also of translation from one European language to the other, whilst listening to what happens when we try to translate from a Ghanaian language into English. So that is happening tomorrow. But at this point, I'd like to thank you very, very much. To all those who were able to join, all those who joined us physically here, as well as those who joined the live stream, and of course, to Professor Dalaban Tuabon, thank you very, very much. It's a great pleasure, and I'm glad the technology held in the end and made it happen. And also, Professor Kofi Anido, it's a great pleasure that you're able to join us once again. Thank you very much, everyone. And coming up next, we will be having a conversation between Abna Sewa Osebinhon, Derek Bro, and Tabeka Cage Conley. This is a conversation that's going to be moderated by Mamle Kabu and Professor Atukwesi, who's joining from California. And they will be talking about writing, networking, and the African diaspora. So that will be coming on the live stream in a few minutes. But in the meantime, once again, thank you very much. And this is Pija, a literary festival in Accra, the 2020.
Click on the here. Yes. Okay, so let me just finish. I just unmuted. No, I mean like
on the screen, the sound is okay. But to us over here, it's not.
There is no bathroom. There are no colored bathrooms in this city. Or anything outside.
Can I get some clarification? Where is the sound coming? Is it on the screen?
Derek, can you unmute
Oh, on the stream. We're having issues
talk
on the
so we
stream.
can do a sound test for you?
Because when I switch, especially when I switch to
I'm not able to hear.
Google Meet, then we had
Can anybody hear me? You guys? Hello, guys.
having that.
Can you hear me?
Okay, so
We
the
need to
sound
do
was
a
a
sound
problem
check
for
for you
the
guys.
screen. Yes. Not
So one of you unmute.
no, not volume.
Okay.
So all
Derek,
we
please
haven't had
unmute
volume for
and
it.
say something
No,
so
not
we
really.
can
But
check
you know,
your
it's
sound.
also coming from their end. That's where the volume is low.
Hello? Hello? Can everyone
Okay.
hear?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you, Tamika. Great.
You need to bring it up.
Ready to go.
Okay, so I'm back again. I'm playing the role of an announcer for this evening's session. We are going to have the second event in Fija 2020. And in actual fact,
This one. No,
it's going to be a conversation. And I'd like to just very quickly mention those who are going to be involved in this conversation. So we welcome them. We have Abna Sewa Oseb in front. We have Derek Guru and America Cage Conley. This session is going to be moderated by Mamle Kabu. And what are they going to be talking about? Writing, networking, and the African diaspora. So we'll be listening to this session for the next 1 hour. Over to you, Mamle.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to apologize that Professor Atukwesen could not join us. He was actually supposed to be the main moderator of the session. I was just going to be an anchor in Accra. I think I'll pause for the sound of the plane to become fainter. Unfortunately, Professor Atukwesen is suffering a power cut in Stanford University of all places, so he cannot join us. But that's no problem. Luckily, we still have our three panelists whom Martin has introduced, and I will now give you a little bit more background about them. Abna Sewa, whom we have top left on our screen, is the founder of Akadi magazine. Did I pronounce that right? Okay, looks like I did. Akadi magazine. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, as a non-ever speaker, I've been told it's Akadi.
Okay, good. Can we confirm that? Anybody?
Akadi.
The audience?
Yeah.
Akadi. Okay, so we're in Ghana. We're going to call it Akadi magazine. So she's the founder of Akadi magazine and the editor. It's an online cultural publication driven by content shaped by Ghanaians in the motherland and the diaspora. And I don't know if anybody has seen the latest edition, but the latest edition is actually about writers in Ghana. It's beautiful, and we can make it available online. It's free online actually. Yeah, a wonderful magazine. Abna has a background in journalism and has written for online and national print publications, including the Graphic, Ghana Web, and Black UK newspaper The Voice. She's keen to explore the ways in which Ghanaians in Ghana and the diaspora can connect meaningfully through knowledge sharing. Derek Nuro, who is easy to identify because he's the unique guy on this panel, is a Ghanaian-American fiction writer based in Iowa City. He is a graduate of the fiction program at the Iowa Writers Workshop, where he was a recipient of the Meta Rosenberg Memorial Fellowship and the Teaching Writing Fellowship. He was awarded the Robert J. Schultz Fellowship in 2016 and is a recipient of a fellowship from the Ragdale Foundation. What Napoleon Could Not Do, his novel in progress, what a wonderful title, traces the members of a Ghanaian family, tied by blood and marriage, as they grapple with the joys and longings and fulfillments and betrayals of love and citizenship. He has taught novel writing at the University of Iowa and is currently Associate Writer, Curatorial Associate at the University of Iowa Stanley Museum of Art. Tamika Cage Connolly, second row, in the amazing necklace, is Assistant Professor of English and Creative Writing at Oxford College of Emory University. She is a graduate of the fiction program of the Iowa Writers Workshop, where she was awarded the Truman Capote Fellowship and the Provost Postgraduate Visiting Writer Fellowship in Fiction. She is the co-founder of the Reclamation Project, which seeks to bridge the gaps among literary artists of the African diaspora. This is something we'll definitely be asking her about. Her work is published in Plowshares, the Virginia Quarterly Review, Callaloo, the African American Review, and elsewhere. She has received writing fellowships from the Iowa Writers Workshop, the Kabe Kanem Foundation, the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and a few other places. She has written a libretto for an opera called A Gathering of Suns, for which she was awarded the Bronze Medal in the Society and Social Issues category of the New York Festival's TV and Film Awards. Tamika received her PhD from Louisiana State University, where she was a recipient of the Hewell Perkins Doctoral Fellowship and recipient of the Lewis Simpson Distinguished Dissertation Award for her dissertation, Painful Discourses, Borders, Regions, and Representations of Female Circumcision from Africa to America. Tamika is currently at work on her first novel, You, Your Father, an epic family saga that considers the untimely deaths of African-American men over 6 decades, beginning in the early 1940s in northern Louisiana. A new work of her fiction will appear in the spring 2021 edition of the Iowa Review. You are all welcome. Okay, part of the reason why you can't hear our panelists all the time is because we discovered that if they keep their microphones on throughout, we'll have a lot of echo. So we've asked them only to switch them on when they're speaking. Okay, yes, I think I would like to start by asking Tamika and Derek, because I know that Derek has also been involved in the Reclamation Project, to tell us a little bit more about that project, because it sounds very pertinent to our topic this evening. Tamika.
Thank you. Thank you, Malik, for the invitation to speak on the panel. I'm so excited to join Abna and Derek, and you, of course. At the time I started at the Writers Workshop in Fiction, there were a number of African students who were friends from Kenya, Nigeria, Derek from Ghana, and I was really interested in how they talked about their relationship, especially my friend from Kenya, her relationship, her language to Kiswahili. And I started to think about my own interest as a person who is African American, but I'm more identified as a displaced African because of the Middle Passage. And I was really curious about if I was ancestrally conversant, if Derek, for example, and really primarily, if he spoke to me in Twi, could I understand him, even though it would not be intelligible to me? Could I to it what he was speaking to me because of ancestral memory and because of the connection I felt still shared by, if not by blood, by spirit. And so it just became really easy because of our friendship to engage in this project with him where we would think about not just language, but also the ways in which across decades, African American and African writers have been speaking to each other thematically across time and subcontinent, seeking connection, and also really just elucidating a connection that has always been we don't see it in our relationships between America and the continent. So a big part of my ambition and my hope was to prove this hypothesis with Derek. If he told me a story in tweet, could I understand it and then speak back to him in a call and response fashion? And we tried it several times, and each time I understand sometimes specific words he's saying to me, and then other times a whole thematic spiritual element of what he's saying. So that was really my first interest. Then we bridge the gap that has been a sort of hole in me, if you will. Even growing up in Shreveport, Louisiana, where I'm from, I always wanted a relationship to the continent. And eventually, when I visited Accra in 2005, I loved feeling very much like it was a place that I wanted to live at some point in my life, and to go home there and build a life from there. The joy I found, the sense of community, and the sense of self I found there. And so I wanted to figure out if there was a way that we work together to create a bridge, not just for me back to Ghana, but for other African Americans and Africans to find a way to communicate with each other anyway, the globe. So we've done it several times through various projects, and perhaps Derek, you might want to pick up at this point.
Thank you, Tamika. Yes, Derek, can we hear from you?
So I will take it. So we've done several things. We hosted several workshops where we have put the literature, African writers, in conversation with the literature of African writers, and very similarly to what we identified when I told Tanika's story in G, was that there has been this unconscious conversation that has been happening all along. And I think, this is something that writers like Toni Morrison knew. She very much knew that her work, at least thematically, was in conversation with the work of African writers on the continent. She was very much aware of this. And for Tanika and I, part of the goal of Reclamation is to spark this conversation and to keep it going, right? To find ways where, and to connect the top of this idea of net. How can the African writer on the ground, right, find networking opportunities outside Africa? And there are many opportunities, one of which we hope is going to be
We're having some technical challenges. I think the internet is
that will give opportunities to writers on the ground to be able to global, and has already been. There's a conversation between
can the other panelists hear Derek right now?
I'm sorry,
Sorry, Derek. The internet speed, I think, is not catching up with you. Can we do anything? Hello. Hello, Derek. Can you hear me? If you could repeat what you said, please. I think we were back. Sorry about that. Okay, no, we still have a problem. Okay, if you could just wait a second, please. But can you guys hear me? Just do give me a thumbs up. Okay, cool. So I can talk while they're sorting us out at this end. And Tamika, just to comment on what you said, that in the context of connections historically, of course, W.E.B. Du Bois came to Ghana and lived here, and Ifua Sutherland also settled in Ghana, and Maya Angelou visited and famously wrote.
Maya Angelou.
Yes.
Yep.
All God's children need traveling shoes. And so, yes, this is a tradition that, and so, yes, I find what you're doing quite visceral in a way because you're actually connecting through a language. Can you account for the fact that you, Tamika, can understand it when Derek speaks Tree without having learned Tree? Do you have any theories, like how can we possibly account for this?
Well, I would say that for me, I do think that Black people around the world are gifted with unique, spiritual, unseen, unlearned ways to communicate with each other. You know, I think that we were born with that. I think that in my case, you know, because I have a passion for the diaspora and because I spent my life reading books, my life dedicated to language, my manner of hearing is not just based on what I know, it's also based on what I can discern. And when he is speaking to me in Tweet, I'm not just, obviously I know what the words mean, but I can hear the intention, I can hear the heart, I can hear the scope, I can hear the storytelling. And you know what we actually have been able to put into place is that this is if you set up the an environment. I'm not the only person who's able to do this. We actually taught students from all over the world here in Ireland for a program with the international writing programs. And what we found is that we could put students who were just learning in conversations with students who were more, accessible to the English language, if you will, and they could do the same thing. So it's actually it's something that we believe is humanity, but the heartbeat of that is empathy. I think that you engage in the process of an empathetic ear, you really can hear what someone is saying, even if you cannot understand it. And I think that I see it as a sort of a homegoing exercise for me with Derek. That there's an aspect of it that is at once about my own journey and my own connection to the diaspora, particularly to Ghana, I have to say. But then there's also, as a scholar, writer, there's also this interest in how, really a question. And I didn't realize this was the question at the time, but then when I approached him with this 3 years ago was, if Derek spoke to me in Twi, could I understand him? That was really the question. But I think now the question has sort of developed into something a little bit more complex, which is, what are the ways in which empathy can sort of destroy what we previously thought we knew about language and its accessibility. And, the question is really also, how deep can we go in storytelling once we have access to stories outside of our own, even if those are not spoken to us in our language?
Yeah, I will take this opportunity to put it quite bluntly and say that whatever the middle passage sought to take from us, it did not take a spiritual kink that I think is part of the reason why Tamika, to some degree, can instinctively understand the stories I tell her, and she.
Well, this is quite remarkable. I think it also points to perhaps an over-reliance. We just assume that the semantic import of words is where the meaning lies, when perhaps it's in other things as well. It's in tonality, and of course African languages are very tonal, and it's in body language, and the body language that goes with speaking, with expression. So yeah, I find it quite fascinating that this is possible. I'd like to bring you in, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, actually, on this sort of communication without prior knowledge of the language. But first, I'd like to ask you about Akadi. And I mean, that's a really great project to have started that, and you make it free online to everybody. It's an amazing magazine. I mean, it looks expensive. It looks like something that has taken a great deal of time to produce. How are you able to do all this, to make it free online, and how did this all begin?
Well, first of all, thank you. The highlight, so I said you're part of it again. So thank you, Mamle, and thank you to everyone. In terms of Akadi, basically it started as a blog. So I've been writing. I'm a journalist, as you said, but I write business journalism. So I don't write anything to do with culture. And for me, it was an outlet for me to connect more to my culture, because I was born in London and my parents came in the 70s from Ghana, and their focus was about assimilation. So I came to Ghana I came to England speaking Tree as a child, but lost it. That sort of thing of you just not feeling connected, and then you in a country, people, judge you because of the way you look. So it's about having an anchoring. So I started writing stories. This was before there was blogging platforms. So I used to just submit them to publications, and obviously because it was centered around being Black or being African, it wasn't something that was taken up by the sort of mainstream newspapers or magazines that I was approaching. And so what for me sort of turned things was when we had blogging platforms in the noughties that allowed me to write what I wanted and publish it and create my own sort of community. But before that, there wasn't really any sort of space to do that. And for me, I found it really important to be able to sort of search in a sort of similar way. I'm not going to connect it, but this idea of being separate from your culture, if you've been taken away from your culture, us in the diaspora that have been born outside, we kind of feel that too, and we feel that even more when we come home. So there's a slight disconnect and all of that stuff. So the blog turned into Akadi actually just last year, just because I write so much and I felt like the blog it was all getting lost in the blog. So I just created the magazine, and when I shared it, it was supposed to be like a souvenir issue for myself, just to put it all together. And when I shared it with my friends, many of them are also diasporans, they really connected with it and they really spoke to them, and not just Ghanaians in London, but also West Indians who felt a connection to it, Americans, everyone, they seemed to, sort of resonate with them. So then after that, I just decided I'd do another issue, and it kind of snowballed. But the idea about making it free was on purpose, because I want it to be read by everyone. I don't want money to be a barrier to you being able to access it, as long as you have internet. So that's kind of where that journey came from.
Okay. Well,
I hope you heard that.
Yes, I heard all of it loud and clear. Yeah. The internet was kind. I had about 10 questions in my head while you were speaking. I'm going to try and remember all of them. One that the one I want to ask first, which links up with Tamika and Derek, is what I'm kind of getting from this panel so far is the role of language in the whole idea of networking across the diaspora. And I'd like to draw a parallel between you and Derek at this point. I know Derek wasn't born in the US, and you were born in the UK. But I want to talk about the role of language. Now, Derek, you speak Tree. Abna did, and she lost it. How does that work in terms of our connection with with the motherland. Would you agree, the two of you, that language is a key factor, and that if, say, Abna still had her tree, she might feel differently? Derek, let's hear you first.
Well, I was actually born in Ghana. I was born and raised. I moved to the U.S. when I was 11. So I have, and my mother has always lived in Ghana. So I've always kind of had one foot in Ghana, one foot in the U.S. And yes, I speak Twi. I speak Twi very fluently, actually. And they kept Twi Yebu Benina. So I'm like a really, like, I speak some Twi. You feel me?
We feel you.
So, speaking particularly to myself, I would say, yeah, I've always felt a keen connection with Ghana because, again, mom has always lived there. I do speak Twi. I return very, very often. And yes, I would say that being able to speak Twi, being able to navigate the terrain, being an intensely, I would say, fluent Twi speaker, benefits me a lot, right? But it does when I'm home. The ability to haggle with a taxi driver is not to be taken lightly in any way. You know, so yeah, it's very helpful for me in navigating the trip when I come home. And it's also been very helpful in terms of my writing. My writing is very much informed. I would say more than influenced. It's very much informed by Akan traditions. Very much. I have been known to be a lyrical writer, and there's a lot of lyricism to Akan proverbs, etc., etc. So, you know, my ability to speak Twi, my ability to read Twi, my ability to understand Twi in its most essential form, if you will, has also very much shaped my writing, and I would say has improved it. Has really improved it.
Okay, that's good to know. And Abna, to go back to you, do you feel that if you had kept your tree, it would change the way that you relate to Ghana now?
Yeah, I think both sides have. I relate to Ghana and how Ghanaians relate to me. Ghanaians in Ghana relate to me. I lived for a time in Brazil and I learned Portuguese while I was there. And it got to a stage where people just assumed I was Brazilian, so you had that level of acceptance.
Yes.
And I don't think I've ever truly had that in Ghana because I'm always reminded that I'm not fluent or I don't speak it or I've got an accent. So that's always a barrier, and I think that's been something that's always spurred me to learn as much as I can about this loss that I have, basically. And I noticed that was the same feeling a lot of people that I shared a Kadi with had, you know, this feeling of just not being enough and wanting to learn as much as they can about their culture.
Yes, yes. And I think you're performing a fantastic service for that, because I've come across a lot of that at writing festivals in different countries. People who were born in Africa but didn't grow up here, or whose parents moved, they have this sense that they have this barrier to fitting in because of the loss of the language. So yes, I think reaching out in this way through the magazine is great. And another question connected with the magazine is, I know that there are other magazines in the UK that are doing similar functions. They're reaching out to Black populations in the UK, such as the Sable magazine. I don't know if you've heard of the I'm sure you've heard of the Sable magazine. Khadija Sese is one of the editors of that. Is there any linking up between the different magazines, the different initiatives of this type in the UK?
So when you say linking up, you mean them coming together, working together?
Yes, working together or
Sorry?
attending events or like organizing joint events or any kind of collaborations. Not only Sable, I mean generally. I know Akadi is recent. So.
I'd actually, yeah, I mean, I'd actually say what we're seeing is there's a plethora of these really granular magazines. So, for example, you've got Black Ballad, which is focused on Black women, and all the content is about Black women, and it's quite English, I would say, in a sort of certain way, because it focuses on the diaspora. So you'll have second or first generation Africans that were born in England. Then you have Melon Mag as well. So you have a lot of these, and I think maybe they do collaborate, but they're quite specific. It's almost like you've seen this fragmentation after having like the Pride magazine or the New Nation or the Voice, which was quite general and included everyone. But now we're getting really specific ones, and I almost feel like it's needed because we tend to be seen as one block outside of Africa, and we're not, you see. And I think you're seeing that sort of identity being pushed up a bit more with people staking their claim to who they are. A lot of non-binary publications, women of colour. So Galdem, for example, that's another publication. It focuses on people of colour who are non-binary. So I do think there's connections where they do work together, but you're seeing them being really specific.
Okay. I'd like you guys to give the audiences a little sample of your work. So I think I'll start with Tamika. If each of you could just, share a bit of your work with us for 3-4 minutes. Maybe give us a little reading. Tamika, are you there? Have we lost Tamika? Okay, well...
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Here.
Tamika, yes. Could we have a short reading from you?
Sure. Read from the opening of my novel in progress. I'll read chapter 1. On an overcast day in December, Lucille Washington watched her son carry a stiff as a frozen pond, his eyes shut quietly and his mouth begged for no one. Lucille worked at a white man's house to make her nice things shine, though her long, stout face reflected in a china. Delicate, hand-painted floral designs on the plate outlined her reflection like an oval halo. Christmas was next week, and the white woman, Linda Mayfair, wanted to get married. She asked Lucille to come early every day until Christmas Eve. She thought about this now, but vaguely. Her mind on her family, on her cleaning, her mind blank. Her mind wore out, down to the bone. Standing in the splendid kitchen, she wore a white dress, starched and ironed the day before, creased in the shoulders, the hem stately at the tablecloth reserved for a holiday feast. This was not Lucille's kitchen, but her height and elegance matched its brightness, and she was nearly as tall as the armoire where wines, liquor, and the various glasses to serve them were kept. Each place the eye wandered, something in the room gleamed, like the spoon Lucille now polished with a thick, chalky paste. Crystal glasses lined a sterling silver tray, gifted to the owners of the home on the occasion of their wedding. A large kettle occupied the rear of the spotless white stove. Dainty white teacups, plates, and bowls filled the white pantry with its glassboards. The whole kitchen was white. Even the heavy curtains, hand-stitched with oversized royal blue roses. The white woman, Linda Mayfair, insisted on a white kitchen, as she believed it would always look clean and bright, even when it was cold outside and gray, like today, as nearly every day had been since November. On the table, poinsettias popped like a fingertip pricked. Mistletoe hung from a buttery gold burgundy ribbon in the entrance of the kitchen. From that place, you could see into the living room, heavy with the scent of the pine tree that would have hit the ceiling had the ceiling not been so gloriously high. Lucille regarded the kitchen and the things it held as reserved for the white and well off. She knew all the trinkets and fanciful things intimately, but she had no business in her heart with these things. As a girl, she might have taken the notion to pretend just once that this was her house, that this glimmer belonged to her, that she could choose from a number of beautiful cups in which to drink water, coffee, freshly squeezed juice, or prepare a drink and fix it tidy for her in the evening. But now, a woman in her 40s, she was no longer a girl with fantasies. So the spoon she cleaned, worth more than all her kitchen utensils combined, was not her spoon. This wealthy life with its elaborate things its family rarely used was not her life. This house and its people, this kitchen, its contents were to her as hollow as she was this morning when she left her house hours before the sun found its place in the sky, looked in on her children, and knew Ananias would not survive the day. She had stood in the child's doorway, the tallest woman of any generation before or after her, dark, generous spirit finally that had come for him. She knew he did not recognize her, and she didn't go to him. As she gazed on the boy, puny, in the bed her husband had built, Lucille pressed her lips tightly together and remembered the day Ananias was born. A day as cold as this one. Even then, his eyes wandered the room, focused on anything, including her face. It seemed he would die that same way, with his eyes wide open but unsteady. A child born not to stay. That's how she kept herself from collapsing in the white woman's kitchen. A child born not to stay. The song gathered from dust in the corners where Lucille had not swept, from the cobwebs around the chandelier not yet cleaned. It wrapped around her and hummed its melody into her ear, tinged with wicked despair. When she saw the hearse reserved for the dead poor creep up Hollywood Avenue, a ghastly sight amidst the winter's frost and gray, a tear trembled in her right eye in tribute to Ananias. He had fought a good fight, had finished his course, the preacher would say before he spring read atop his casket like lunatic not stop her work, save for the one tear in the body of her boy soon to take its journey to the ground. Today was a day like any other.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamika. That's really moving. Is this from you, your father, your novel in progress?
Yes, I'm hoping it will soon not be in progress. They'll be finished.
I'm looking forward to reading it. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Abna, I don't know if you are going to read from the magazine or you just want to take the time to tell us about your latest edition or any way you want to give us a sample of your recent work. 3-4 minutes. Hello?
So what I was going to read was, can you hear me? What I was going to read, because I did the Q&A, the fifth issue is kind of the question and answer, so it might be a bit clunky, but what I was going to do was read from one of my favourite authors who I believe you're going to have on Pedja tomorrow, which is Frances Mensah Williams. And she talks about belonging and identity, which is, you know, a topic that many of us in the diaspora grapple with. So it's basically from one of her books, which is From Pastor to Pigfoot. And I interviewed her some years ago, and I just turn that into an article. So it's a kind of review of her book. So I can read that.
Thank you.
So, from pasta to pigfoot. So basically, born in Ghana and raised in the UK, fictional character Faye Bonsu grapples with understanding her British Ghanaian identity after a trip to the motherland in the novel From Pasta to Pigfoot. I speak to novelist Frances Mensah Williams about how she uses the book to articulate issues of identity, belonging, and cultural awakening. So From Pasta to Pigfoot follows the adventures of Faye Bonsu, a 20-something British Ghanaian who discovers that there is more to life than her mundane job as a PA in London and being with her useless boyfriend. Her life takes on an exciting twist when she visits relatives in Ghana and embarks on a journey of self-discovery. Food is an important metaphor, and the title From Pasta to Pigfoot draws on Faye's dual cultural influences. Faye was born in Ghana, home to the delicacy of pigfoot, which is also eaten across Africa and the Caribbean, and also America, but grew up in England, hence the reference to the West and pasta. Although not autobiographical, was inspired to write the novel after drawing on her own experiences as a Ghanaian living in England. This cultural duality fuels Faye's exploration into her heritage and understanding of Ghana's social and economic landscape, and insight into how Africans born or raised outside the continent navigate these two worlds. I think if people like the who understand how powerful it is when you go back to the motherland to look around and see yourself reflected in people's faces, Frances said. When you live in a society where you stand out visibly, you become aware of it, but it's almost like your norm every day. You automatically put on armor in order not to be bothered by the fact that you don't see yourself reflected in the people that surround you. When you go to a country or a place where that doesn't exist anymore, that allows you to drop the armor, just relax and be. Frances is keen to push these complex conversations further and uses the novel to challenge cultural stereotypes about Africa and being African. While this book does not shy away from issues of economic hardship in Ghana, the country's slave trading past, or the country's slave trading past, Frances is also keen to contemporize what it means to be African. This is a book about Ghana today and Africans today, she said. I'm not really interested in telling the story about colonialism and the negative side of cultures. This has been talked about many times. I want to talk and focus on what doesn't get talked about today's Africans who are very cosmopolitan, very middle class, exposed to the same sort of media, news, activities, art and fashion as everyone else in this world. And that's it.
Thank you. I do love that contemporary feel, and that's something that I got from the whole magazine, that it's very much about Africans today, both in Africa and in the diaspora. Yeah. Derek, do you have anything for us? Maybe something from what Napoleon could not do? A few minutes?
I do. Actually, it's funny. Among the many thematic focuses of what Napoleon could not do are the power outages that we, for a while, suffered. I think we're constantly experiencing power outages in Ghana, and Atu is currently not here with us because he's experiencing a power outage in California right now. So I thought it would be fitting for me to read an excerpt from a portion of the novel that is very much steeped, literally, in darkness. And to provide a bit of context, this is actually near the end of the novel. Excuse me. And Belinda, one of the main characters, has returned to Ghana with her African American husband. His name is Wilder Thomas. He is 30 years, her senior. They initially got married out of convenience. I won't go into too much detail. I will if it ever comes up to find out what I mean by they got married out of convenience. But anyway, so they have returned to Ghana. Belinda and Wilder have returned to Ghana for a funeral. And this is the day of their return in Kumasi. They have just arrived. Belinda's father is welcoming them, and they have arrived on the veranda of the house. And he has just placed his daughter, whom he had seen, in a chair on the veranda. So I will take it from there. He placed her in one of the veranda chairs, firmly cushioned beside the one Wilder occupied. Now she was seeing her father adequately illuminated. There were crinkles around his eyes. He had a lower hanging chin. Sorrow generally wrote on his face. She noted his strange shuffle as he headed inside the house. Left to themselves, Wilder stood behind her, unknotting her shoulders with his thumbs. She stared at the towers of collapsed chairs by the gate. Tomorrow, they would be lined up for the gathering following Alfred's internment. She inclined her head at Wilder to inform him of what would become of the chairs. Suddenly, darkness burst forth. "Lights off!" a voice exclaimed in high-pitched alto. Wilder finger-tapped her shoulders reassuringly. This was part of the reason they were here. She sensed him feeling his way back to his chair. The blackout had capped off her distress and exhaustion. She was anxious now only for rest. Her father, however, brought out a lantern and held it up so that for several more minutes, Belinda and Wilder accepted Ya's solemn welcome, then Robert's and Martha's, then Kwame Brony's and his wife's. "Where's Jacob?" asked Belinda. "He's away," replied her father. "Where?" "Oh, not far. He should be back soon." With the benefit of an outsider's remove, Wilder could command a temporary suspension of his own anguish and engage them in conversation. Her father's effortless banter with Wilder did not surprise Belinda. He knew to put on geniality when it mattered. It most mattered now. He owed so much to Wilder. "Welcome home, son," her father said. Son sounded about right, despite their same age. Running with it, Wilder continued with more casual banter. He invited Robert and Martha into the enterprise of chatter. In the ensuing dearth, Belinda reached for him. "My brother and his wife are deaf," she whispered. "Shit! How did I forget?" Although she knew nobody believed an apology necessary, she implored the hearing to pardon Wilder's error. She took the opportunity to highlight their exhaustion as discombobulating and excused themselves to bed. But sleep evaded her. Wilder had fallen to it quickly, and she could no longer stand awaiting her turn. She got out of bed, leaving the dying candle on the nightstand. Outside the bedroom door was fierce blindness. Instead of reverting for the candle, she forged on groping her way along the walls. Prior to bed, she'd diligently taken in the house's interior with just the light of her cell phone. Her foot knocked on wood, her knee on foam. Touching for the seat of the chair, she squeezed it. "Oh," she said. The owner moaned, speechlessness that caused her to predict Robert. Sorry. She recalled that she could speak to by fingering his flesh. She signed sorry into his thigh. Wheesh! She thought the thigh had spoken. She stepped back. Pa? She said. I'm not Pa. Jacob, she said. You're back. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. That feeling of groping around in the dark is quite familiar. Yeah. Thank you so much. We are starting to get towards the latter end of this panel. So there's a question I'd just like to ask each of you in the context of the things that we've discussed so far, which is, what do you think is the best way to connect writing communities between Africa and the diaspora? Now we talked about linking up the different initiatives within the UK, but now I want us to talk about linking up between Africa and the diaspora.
I think technology is our friend. We're very lucky in this day and age, especially now with Corona, that we're able to have Peja. We haven't had to cancel lots of these types of events, and I think this is an opportunity for us to use it to advantage. I found personally things like Blogger and all of those types of platforms at a time when I was writing about stuff that nobody wanted to publish. I was able to have my own space and do that, and I think similarly, Africans in the diaspora and Africans in the motherland can use that to their advantage, where publishers, although I think they're changing and they're more open to publishing work by Africans, you know, it's a slow-ish process still, so you can the sort of bull by the horns and work with what we have and sort of drive that change, use social media to promote yourself, go to things like this and connect with people yourself. So that's what I think.
Thank you very much. And of course, you're doing a fabulous job yourself with Akadi. Yes, the other two, can you come in on this question, please? Either one.
Did you call my name or I'm sorry?
No, I said anybody. First come, first serve.
Okay, I guess I'll just yeah. So I've been thinking of I you know, as someone who's born in the U.S., the only thing I can say is that, you know, for all of my career, from the time I was in graduate school, starting when I was 23, until now, 20 years later, and I don't look 43, but I am. That my dedication has been to thinking about lives outside of my own, particularly lives on the continent. And I do think that we suppress a common interest in each other, and this might be another panel. But for me, it's been very necessary to think about my own interest in building this bridge, which I've done in my own work. So I really do think that it can be. I definitely agree with Abner about technology, and I would also add to that actually adding writers from the continent to our reading list, and thinking about what expressions, thoughts, interests, pain points, life experiences we find that are similar. It's really been through reading and being dedicated to reading my whole life that has brought me here to this panel. I mean, being dedicated to reading and to a life in the arts is how I met you, Mamle, at AWT in Portland. So I honestly don't think that we can underestimate what it means when we pick up a book by a writer that maybe we would not normally think about as being connected to our own story, and then think about, well, how is this connected to my story? And then become dedicated to that, follow that writer, and then once this pandemic is over, especially in our country, how reckless we're being, it's insane and embarrassing and shameful. And once we can get on a plane, I would say go somewhere and maybe not come back. I mean, maybe go to the continent and then just like stay there and begin to, cultivate a life that looks like freedom. And the reason why I can give that as an example is because that is the way it has happened in my life. It started with the book, you know. So I would say literacy. How we build networks is through literacy. We connect literacy to lived experiences, and then we connect lived experiences to community, and then we connect community to ourselves as individuals, and try to join that community. And now the internet, and you can have hope, you know.
Okay, we lost you at the end, but I think we heard most of it. What's happening? We seem to be getting some feedback here. Okay, well, Tamika, yeah, I really like what you said. I think what I'm hearing is you're saying engage with the culture through books, through literature, through film, you know, engage with the culture from where you are, and then also go there, you know, and learn about it. The engaging with the culture and the reading, I think it's great, and obviously we're here because we read a lot. Do you think it's something a lot of people will do though?
Yes, I think that as people who have platforms like we do continue to, and then we think about, you know, there are people, you know, we're in a moment where we have major African writers influencing how Americans read. From Ya Jesse to, you know, the biggest literary star in the world was Chimamanda Ngozi. And I think that people will do it. I think people are doing it. The issue, they're not connecting those experiences to theirs. It's like they need a cultural broker, you know, this term that I learned when I was researching for my dissertation. They need somebody to say, and this is where I would like to believe that, you know, our work together with Reclamation comes in. Someone to curate an awareness that this is something that we have in common, right? There's a commonality here. It's not just a book, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to engage, not just in another world of these characters. Because honestly, I wouldn't be a fiction writer if I did not think that there was a way through fiction I could impact the world and I could impact my community locally, globally, right? I'm not just, like as writers, we're not just like la la la, let's just look up. Like we're trying to use that to build a platform. And I think that through that platform, we can show people, you know, that this is something, even if you don't know this is something that's missing in you, this is something that's missing in you, right? I didn't know that necessarily until I got to Accra. I knew that was it, but it wasn't until I actually arrived in Ghana that I realized exactly